on this Saturday afternoon. I forgot about the recording, but just welcome and thanks for joining me. This is Overlay Mosaic Crochet. We're going to do this neat scarf, and this is the technique. I'm going to show you everything you need to know about this technique. This is a great beginner scarf if you have never done overlay mosaic crochet, because it's a really pretty basic pattern, and we're using a nice bulky weight yarn, so it won't take too long. If you've ever seen overlay mosaic crochet, it can get very, very intricate, very, very detailed. You'll see lots of beautiful artwork and images and all kinds of, fun things that people do with overlay mosaic crochet. But the technique is the same. So no matter how much detail that you see, it's the same technique. So once you learn it, you can do all those super fancy things. This scarf has the fringe on the end, and that's kind of built into how we do overlay mosaic crochet. So I'll show you how that works. And all we need today are a couple of quick things. So if you want to switch over to my hands, I'll show you the materials we need. And please make sure you ask me questions throughout. Oh, we're flipped a little bit. Are we flipped, Chanel?
Yeah, it looks like it switched at some point for some reason.
Yeah, hold on. Let me fix this. Give me 1 second. No, not that one. I think I'm going to have to take this out and redo it. This might take a minute, guys.
There you go.
Okay. Oops. Flip, flip. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Let me just readjust this back in here so we're good on that view. Okay, great. That's better. So what I was saying, hello, Christine, is please feel free to ask any questions throughout. If I miss it, Chanel will poke me and say, hey, somebody had a question before we move on any further, okay? So we are going to use our Loops and Threads Charisma number 5 bulky weight yarn. It's an acrylic yarn. It's a pretty smooth texture, so easy to use and quick to work up. And I have this color, which is, I don't know the names on the pattern. Boysenberry and Rose Garden. Okay, that's what we have, but you can use any colors you want. It's cool to use like a variegated for one part and then a solid for the other part. You don't want to use 2 variegateds because it's just going to kind of blend in and you're not going to see the outline of the pattern. Okay, so if you're going to use not 2 solids, if you want to use a variegated, use a variegated and a solid, or 2 solids. Okay, I'm using my 6.5 millimeter hook and it's just a pair of scissors. That's all we need. And also the written pattern I have printed out here. We're going to work mostly from the chart because I'm going to teach you how to do all this stuff. But everything I'm going to go over is also in written instructions as well. Okay, so you have everything you need. This is just my little swatch. Together we're going to make a swatch like this. And then once you can do the swatch, you can do the whole entire scarf. It's the same thing. It's just more stitches, obviously. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. For overlay mosaic, we work 1 row and we do not turn. So we work 1 row on the right side always. So from right to left, 1 row, from right to left, the next row, from right to left, the next row. And we cut the yarn after each row. That's why we end up with these fringes on either side, because we're not turning. We're cutting every row. This is what it'll look like on the front. This is what it'll look like on the back. So it doesn't have, it's not like it has a right and a wrong side. Okay. Each row represented in the chart is just alternating colors. So we start with 1 color and then we work the next color. We cut that color. We start with the alternate color. So it just alternates. So this part right here where you see the first 2 colors, that lets you know, okay, this one I'm working C1, next row C2, C1, C2, C1, C2, and you just alternate between the 2 colors throughout. These, the the way this part works is a little bit different, and I'll show you how that works. But if you look at just this part, the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of every row are just going to be those alternating colors. And we're going to start every row with 2 single crochets, and we're going to end every row with 2 single crochets. And then the stitches in between that form the pattern are going to be long double crochet stitches and single crochet stitches through the back loop only. And that's the whole thing. So throughout the whole pattern, you'll only be using those 3 stitches: single crochets, long double crochets, and single crochets through the back loop only. And I'll show you how to do those. So let's just jump right in. So I'm trying to see, C1 is, where did I start with the solid? Okay, so I started with the solid. And I'm going to use my 6.5 millimeter hook. And I'm just going to chain, for this little swatch, I'm going to chain 26 because I want 25 stitches. For the pattern, you're going to chain more for the full scarf. But for the swatch, we're just going to start with 26. Okay, so I got my slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to chain 26. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Now this is the very first row to get the pattern started. And in this very first row, I am going to turn and work across the chain. But after that, we're going to cut every row, okay? So I'm just going to work single crochets into the second chain from the hook, and then each chain across. So here's my second chain right here. I like to work into the back loops. It's just how I do it. So single crochet into each chain across. And then that should leave me with 25 single crochets. And that's what I want to make my little swatch. And as you can see on the, if you're looking at the chart, if you're looking at right now, what we're doing is the setup row. So if you refer to the chart, you can see the setup row is all in the color C1, which is this solid color. And then once we get all these single crochets worked, we're going to cut this. Just like a, this is holding me back here. I'll get this part out. Okay. It's more loose. So very basic, just single crocheting across your chain for 25 single crochets to set us up for the mosaic pattern. Okay, so there we go, 25 single crochets. And I want to cut this. And because I want fringe for this scarf, I want some nice fringe at the end of my scarf, I'm going to keep a decent length when I cut this. Now, it doesn't have to be that long, but. And then I'm just going to fasten off by securing this. So like chain. So yarn over and chain. Pull that through so that doesn't go anywhere because that's our fringe, okay? Now, I'm not turning this. This is the right side. I want to start with row 1. So row 1, as you can see, because I've got right here the first 2 stitches say A. And in A, it says on the pattern, A means single crochet through both loops. Okay, so we're going to grab our next color, and I know it's the next color because I can see right here that we're in the pink, which is C2. So to join this to this little row that I made, I want to start with a standing single crochet. And that's very easy to do, but I also want to make a fringe on this side. So I'm going to leave a pretty decently long tail here, and then I'm going to make my slip knot. Okay, so we start with a slip knot on the hook and a long tail, so we have our fringe. And then I'm just going to, this is the end of my row, I'm going to insert my hook under both loops of the single crochet, the first single crochet of the setup row with the right side facing, right? And then I'm just going to do a single crochet. So we've got the slip knot on the hook, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through those 2. And that's my first single crochet, which is A on the chart. And my second, and then I want another single crochet because there's another A on the chart. So I want to do another single crochet through both loops. I'm going under both loops and I'm doing a single crochet. Now the way we read the chart is like this. So all these squares that are blank, the blank squares mean that we're going to single crochet through the back loop only. So if you don't see an L or an A on the square, that means you're going to do single crochet through the back loop only, okay, until we get to the last 2, because then at the last 2 there's an A. Now it may look like there's a brown here and there's a brown here, or not a brown, but there's a C1 and a C1 here, but there's no letter on this square, so you really want to ignore that color is there, right? Because unless I see a letter, I need to do a single crochet through the back loop only. That color isn't going to come in on the next row when we do the L, okay? So let's do all the way across. As you can see, there's no letters in any of these boxes. So we're going to just single crochet through the back loop only all the way across. Now, if you can see, I know it's kind of hard to see the light, but here's the back loop and here's the front loop. And I want to go through the back loop and make a single crochet. And that leaves kind of an open loop right here. And we're going to use that later in the pattern, okay? So back loop only. Oops. What happened to my, oh, I started with the tail. But you guys know that happens. I crocheted the tail instead of crocheting the working yarn. So make sure you don't crochet the tail. But basically what I did, slip knot on my hook, 2 single crochets. Okay, and now we're going through the back loop only of all these stitches. So back loop, back loop. So you guys can see I'm working through the back loop only, and that's leaving me this front loop is right here. So there's a front loop sort of open, ready to be used if I need it, when I need it. And I'm just going to work back loop only, single crochet all the way across until I get to the very last 2 stitches of the row. And here I'm at the last 2 stitches of the row. And according to my chart, so I'm on row 1, it says AA. That means single crochet through both loops. So I'm going to go under both loops and single crochet, under both loops and single crochet. And then I'm just going to fasten off this row. So remember, leave a long tail for your fringe. And chain to secure it. Pull that through, and that secures it. So let's see if you can tell how it looks. See, it looks slightly different, those 2 stitches in the beginning and those 2 stitches at the end. are worked through both loops, and that just kind of keeps it from, because if it's the back loop, it pulls a little bit. So that just kind of leaves like a border around the sides. So it looks neater that way. That's why we usually always do either one or two. I usually always do two both loop single crochets just to keep everything neat and tidy. Okay. So that was row 2. Now, if I refer back to my chart, I can see. Just want to make sure no one has any questions. Yep, everybody's with me here. Okay, great. So now I'm on row 2, and here's my chart. Row 2, I can see that my color is C1. So I am going to grab a strand of the C1, and I'm going to work my first 2 stitches, which are single crochets through both loops. So long tail for that fringe, slip knot, put that right on my hook. Don't work on the tail like I did before. Work from the working yarn, from the ball. And I'm back to my C1. So, and as you can see, I didn't turn. I'm back at the right side. We're never turning here. We're just cutting every row. So everything's going to be right side facing. So single crochet and single crochet through both loops. Now let's look at the chart. I have a blank box and a blank box, and that means single crochet through the back loop only. So I have 2 of those. So let's do 2 single crochets through the back loop only. That's 1, and that's 2. And then my next box says L, and L means long double crochet. And when we work the long double crochet, we are working it in the row 2 rows below. So this is 1 row below, and this is 2 rows below. So we want to put our long double crochet in that front loop that we left open from this row because we worked in the back loops. And remember, we left those front loops ready to be used. So the trick is you have to make sure you're aligned, right? So sometimes I'll count and I'll say, okay, here's 1, 2 stitches. And then here's 1, 2 front loops. And then this is where I want to work my long double crochet because it has to be lined up, right? So I'm just going to yarn over to make a double crochet. And then I'm going to hook just that front loop only. Insert my hook under there. Now I have 3 loops on the hook, and then you just complete a double crochet like you normally would. So yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Okay, and that's my long double crochet. So now if I go back to my chart, I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more blank boxes. So I'm going to work 5 back loop only single crochets. But you want to make sure, because we did that long double crochet, that we skip this stitch back here because we don't want to work anything into there because that stitch is already accounted for. We keep the same number of stitches throughout every row. We don't add or increase or decrease. So we have to make sure we don't put anything in there because we already used that stitch for the long double crochet. So I'm going to skip that one, and then I'm going to work 5 back loop only single crochets. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, I have a long double crochet, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another long double crochet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another long double crochet. So that's basically the same thing that we're doing. So now here I'm like, okay, well, I always count because sometimes it's hard to tell to line them up perfectly. So this is where my long double crochet was. So I'm going to look at these front loops and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So skip those 5 because we did the back loop only single crochets. And then the long double crochet goes into this one, right? So yarn over, just hook that with your hook, that front loop, and work a double crochet into that front loop. So you're working your double crochet into the front loop only of the stitch 2 rows below. I'm skipping that stitch on the working on the 1 row below, and then I'm working 5 back loop only single crochets. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now I need another long double crochet right here. So because I don't want to put it in the wrong one, I always count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's the 6th one, and that's where it goes. So yarn over and make my double crochet into that front loop. Skip that one back there and work 5 more. Back loop only singles. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now I know I see I have 3 stitches left. I have those 2, both loops, those 2 regular single crochets. And this is my last stitch before that. So I know that's where I want my long double crochet to go. Long double crochet. And now back to the chart. So here's the long double crochet. We just did that. And then 2 single crochets through both loops, which is the A. So both loops, both loops. And then we're just going to cut that, leaving the long tail and fasten it off. So that's set up rows 1 and rows 2 that we've done. And now you can see it kind of looks like the chart because we have these longer stitches right here, right? Okay. So now we alternate back to our color C2. We're just going to use these 2 colors alternating throughout the whole pattern. So long tail, slip knot on my hook. And this is called a standing single crochet when you join without having to like slip stitch, chain up 1 single crochet, you know, you just join directly with the single crochet. I like to use standing stitches. I think they're convenient and a little less bulky. So I'm just going to go right into that first single crochet with a single crochet, a standing single crochet. Make sure I'm not working the tail, and then a single crochet into the next. So here we are on row 3. So you can see I'm on my color C2 because that's the color that's on the chart. And I did 2 regular single crochets. And the next stitch is a long double crochet. And that's because, and I know that because it says L. So the long double crochet here is going into the same color, right? So you'll always know it's going to go into the same color, so you won't accidentally put it like 3 or 4 rows below. You're going only 2 rows below with all of these, right? So this is 1 row below, this is 2 rows below, right? It's going to be matching. Your colors are going to be matching there. So for the next stitch, I'm going to do a long double crochet into this front loop here from 2 rows below. So yarn over, hook that front loop, and double crochet. And that looks like that. So now moving along, I have a blank box, even though it's a different color, that doesn't matter. It's blank. So that means back loop only single, back loop only single, back loop only single. So remember, we're skipping this one because we did the long double crochet previously. And then we're doing 3 back loop only singles. 1, 2, and 3. Back to my chart. So I did those 3. And now I have 3 long double crochets. L, L, L. So let's do that. So now if I look, I still want to count these front loops because I don't want to place it in the wrong front loop. So here I did 1, 2, 3 stitches. So I need to skip 3. So I'm skipping this one, I'm skipping this one, and I'm skipping this one. And that's 3. And then I'm working my long double crochet into this next one. and into the 2 right beside it, because we have 3 right together, right? 3 right beside each other. So that's 2, and that's 3. 3 long double crochets. And then look at the back, make sure you skip those 3. 1, 2, 3, and then work your 3 back loop only single crochet. So I skipped 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to do 3 back loop only single crochets in the next 3 stitches. So when you do the back loop only single crochets, the boxes that are blank, you're doing those in the row below. And when you're doing the long double crochets, you're doing those 2 rows below, 1, 2 rows below, okay? And also it's kind of, you don't have to count like 1 row, 2 row. It's pretty intuitive, because you know when you're doing a long double crochet, you're working that into the matching color. So you're working over over these stitches of the previous row and working into that matching color. And that's what creates the pattern, basically. You know, like the objects or whatever it is you make, like these diamonds, that's what's creating these diamonds, because these long double crochets are worked over. So these C2 colors are worked over the C1 color, and it hides the C1 color of that row. And that's what creates that pattern, because you're hiding the other color. And here you're hiding you're hiding the variegated color with the solid, and here you're hiding the solid with the variegated. So that's why you can make these you know, diamonds or whatever it is. And as you can see on the back, it's just alternating 1 color, 2 colors, right? Solid, variegated, solid, variegated, solid, variegated. But on the front, because you're working over those rows, you're creating the pattern. That's basically how it works. So now if I look ahead on row 3 that we're on, we're doing the same thing. We're doing 3 back loop only singles and 3 long, 3 back loop only single, 3 long. So let's just do that across. I'm going to skip, because I have 3 back loop only singles, I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do my long in the next 3. So 1, 2, and 3. Skip those in the back, 1, 2, 3, and then do my back loop only singles, 1, 2, and 3, 2, 3, and now 3 more long, 1, 2, 3. So once you know this technique, you really don't even need the written. I mean, the written instructions are all here for you, but I mean, for me, it's much easier and quicker just to go by the chart. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Now see, I have 2 stitches, and then I also have my 2 regular single crochets. So let's look at the chart and see how this row ended. So now you see at the very end of the row, after I did those 3 long double crochets, I only have 2 blank boxes. So that means I have 2 back loop only single crochets, which I did right here, 1 and 2. And then I have my 2 kind of border stitches, my regular single crochets. And that's the end of that row. Leave a long tail and fasten that off so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, now we alternate. So we're going back to our solid color. And if I look at my chart, I am on row 4. So let's just join this one with our standing single crochet. Got my long tail. And I'm just gonna single crochet in the first stitch and single crochet in the next stitch. And that's those 2 A's, right? The 2 A's. Then I have a blank box, and then a long double crochet, a blank box, and a long double crochet. So back loop only single, long double, back loop only single, long double. So next stitch, back loop only single. Now I want to do a long double. This is the next stitch right here for my long double. Remember, I'm working 2 rows below all the time for those. And then I need a back loop only single, and then another long double. So skip this stitch because that's the back loop only, and the next long double goes into this front loop. And you can see it looks like the chart, right? So it looks like a little boop, 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 just like that. So the chart is gonna appear like what the pattern is. Okay, so now what do we have here? So we did the 2 long doubles, and now we have 1, 2, 3 back loop only singles. And then we have that again, long, back loop only long, right? So I'm skipping this one, and I'm going 1, 2, 3 back loop only singles, and then a long double in this color, 2 rows below, a back loop only single, 1 row below, and a long double here, 2 rows below. And then I'm guessing we're going to have 3 back loop only singles again, right? Because it's a very repetitive pattern. It's an easy pattern. So here we go. 3 back loop only singles. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm doing that same thing again. Long, back loop only, long, and then 3 back loop only singles. So long, back loop only in the next stitch. Skipping this one, long in this one. And then back loop only in these 3. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm down to 4 stitches here, right? So my 2 regular singles, and now what do I do with these next 2? So here I am on row 4. Here's the last 2, and then I see I have 1 long and 1 back loop only single. So 1 long double crochet, and then a back loop only single in this next stitch here, and then my 2 border stitches, which are just the regular single crochets. Everybody with me? You guys must be doing pretty good because I don't have any questions. So I can see that everyone is with me, and I'm not surprised because I know you guys know how to crochet, and this is really a couple basic stitches. So it's really not that complicated. I think it looks more complicated than it is. And once you learn the technique, it's quite simple. So let's see, we are on row 5, and I am going to do my color C2. So that's the variegated one. I'm leaving a long tail. And I'm gonna single crochet and single crochet those first 2 border stitches. And then I have 2 blank boxes and an L. So we know what that means. Back loop only single, back loop only single, and an L. And the L goes in this one little loop that's open there, right? Because this is the back loop only single, and this is the other back loop only single. So the next stitch is right here. And I'm doing a long double crochet there. Okay, and now 2 back loop only singles and a long one. So skip this one here. That's 1, 2 back loop only singles, and the long one's going to go in the center right here because this is the back loop only, and this is the next one. So long double crochet, and this looks like the same all the way across. So 2 back loop only long, 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 right? So we'll just do that all the way across. So skip this one. Back loop only, and long in that front loop that's peeking out right there. Back loop only, and long in this center one. Skip that one, back loop only, and long double crochet here. You can see, I mean, it's very repetitive. Back loop only, and long. But that's just because this stitch pattern is a beginner one. You'll see there's a lot more advanced patterns out there, but even though they're advanced, they are the same exact technique. You're just doing these long stitches into the stitches 2 rows below. There's nothing more difficult about them other than you're going to have different, like you're not going to have repeats as much. It's just going to be a lot of different things, but it's still only going to be those 2 stitches. And where did we end off here? So we should end with a long double crochet before the 2 border stitches, and then the 2 border stitches. And then fasten that off. So if we continue this way, at the end, after we do up to 17 rows, or it'll be the 18th because we did a setup, it's going to basically look just like this. So if you want to go ahead and work through the whole swatch, you can do that and then measure it, make sure your gauge is good. But you know, if your gauge is slightly off, it's a scarf. It's going to fit if it's a slightly bigger or slightly smaller, right? So for scarves, gauge isn't super important like it is for, you know, garments and hats and gloves and stuff, right? So if your stitches are a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, then that's fine. This yarn recommends an 8mm hook, but I find that to be, I don't know, maybe I'm a tight crocheter, but I prefer using a 6.5 with this yarn. So just use whatever you feel most comfortable with and whatever gives you the most consistent sized stitches. That'll be your best bet because like I said, it's a scarf. So if it's a little bit bigger or whatever, it's a little bit longer or a little bit narrower or even wider, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But at the end, so once we do the whole stitch pattern through, and I believe this is the whole thing. This 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So this whole thing is the whole entire scarf, right? So from the setup row to the last row, that's how many rows you will work for the whole scarf. You're just going to have more, obviously, stitches this way, right? You're going to have 163 instead of just the 25 that we did for the swatch. But all these rows are going to be exactly what we did. And then once you get to the very last row, you're just going to work a single crochet. See how this very last row, I put all A's. That just means at the very last row, you're going to work 1 row of single crochets all the way across. And that'll give it a nice edge. So you don't have any so you have, you know, the same edge at the beginning as you do at the end. So if you guys, let me check my chat and see if I have any questions. I don't think anybody has any questions. If you guys want, I can show you because we have a little bit more time. I think everybody guessed this because nobody had any questions. So I'm guessing you guys are with me. I can show you something cool, which is a border. So if you see a blanket, like let's say you want to make a blanket with this, right? But you don't want like the whole side edge of your blanket to have a bunch of fringe like this, right? Fringe is more appropriate for like, it is good for blankets, but it's like better at the top and the bottom of the blanket, right? So you would have to work it this way. And then make sure your pattern is, you know, your pattern is going to be like vertical, right? And then you would have your fringe at the top and your fringe at the bottom of your blanket, if that's what you want. Or I guess you could have fringe at the sides of a blanket. I don't know. That might be, I don't know. I guess that'd be cool too. But if you don't want any fringe at all and you want to make a blanket, you can make a border around this that would encase all of these ends, because remember, we're cutting every row, so you really have to you're not gonna be able to do anything with all these at the end except weave them in, which is a big hassle. So what you can do is make a border instead, and the way I do that is I make what's called an envelope border. Let's do it with the, we'll just do it on here on this little swatch. Now this is just to show you guys, I'm not counting stitches or anything. I'm just kind of showing you this technique. So what I would do is I would start on the wrong side, okay? And then I would make a row of slip stitches across here. And that would, so like a surface slip stitch, right? So I think it's a surface slip stitch, I'm pretty sure. So what I would do is I would take this hook and put it in from the, so the wrong side facing, put it in from top to bottom. And then I would take that slip knot, okay, and put it back on the hook. And now I'm just gonna work across and do this really loosely, because you're gonna have to work into these stitches afterwards. So you don't want them to be really tight. So I'm gonna pull that slip knot up. There's my slip knot. And then I'm gonna go back down. So from front to back, and grab my yarn, pull it up. Okay, now there's the loop. First loop on my hook, second loop on my hook. I'm gonna pull this loop through this loop. So the second through the first. And that gives me a slip stitch. And then I'm gonna go into, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get a white really quick because I think it'll be easier to see. Hold on, I have a bunch of different colors. I just feel like this will be easier to see on camera so you can see the, and of course I'm gonna have a big trouble getting this out of the center. Okay, I have my big yarn barf, as they call it. And there's an end. Okay, so let me do this again. I just want to show you this with white because I think that the red is, or the boysenberry is not really showing up too good. Okay, so start with your slip knot, and then remember we're going in the wrong side first. And so I would go in like, here's like the very edge. You don't want to go in there, like maybe go over one. So where that second border stitch is, right? And then pull that slip knot through. Now you've got the slip knot on the other side, and you're holding your yarn on the, like on the back, but you're working on the front. Okay, so now I'm going to go in just kind of where a hole presents itself. You know, you're not really, you don't have to go into specific stitches. Then I'm going to pull a loop up and pull that loop through the loop that was on my hook. And then go down through the next hole. Just try to make them as even as possible. And pull that through. So what's happening is I'm holding my hook on one side of my fabric, and I'm holding my yarn on the other side of the fabric. And I'm just kind of working about one per row is a good measure. So like one slip stitch per row. And that's going to be a good place where the, like a little hole will present itself for you in the fabric to work that slip stitch. And then just work that across. And then don't go all the way to the bottom. Do we go all the way to the bottom? I'm trying to remember because I haven't done this in a while. Yeah, so we don't have to go all the way to the bottom. So I would go to like one row there, right? And then now I have a row of surface slip stitches here. So I can work into here. Yeah, I can work into here. Okay, so now I would probably cut these so they're not in your way too much, because these are gonna be stuck in the border. They're not gonna show, right? So now I have these loops on this side. See, it's like one loop, and then it's kind of a chain on the other side, or a slip stitch on the other side. And then I can cut this, and then I would pull this one through here to secure it. And then, so let's say you do that on this side and you do that on this side. You could technically do it all the way around, but we don't really need to because we can work into these stitches. So you want to do one of the surface slip stitch on this side and one on this side. And then you want to take some, whatever you want to use for your border, and you want to work some double crochet stitches. So I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook, and I'm just going to join here. Let's start here with a double crochet. So standing double crochet, slip knot on the hook, yarn over, put that into, now you want it, you're going to have to work on both sides. So only one loop. So the front loop, right? Don't work into both loops. Double crochet. And then I'm going to work a double crochet into the front loop of each of these stitches across. And then once I get to the corner, I'll probably have to add a couple double crochets just to turn the corner. So I would add maybe 3. Usually I do 3. So remember, I'm just going into the front loops. I'm leaving the back loops open so we can work into those on the other side. So I'm going into the front loops, and now I'm on the right side of my piece, but we're going to work this on the right side and on the wrong side. Okay, so now I don't want to go past these stitches because that's where we're going to do the rest of our border. So I'm at this last stitch here. So I'm going to put 2 more double crochets into that same stitch so I can turn the corner, right? So I have the space to turn the corner. And now that I've turned, I'm going to work my double crochets into these stitches that we made, these slip stitches. And now, as you can see, they can be, oh, this one isn't giving me any trouble. If you make it too tight, it'll be hard to get into those stitches. So don't make it too, so make sure you're nice and loose on your gauge when you work those surface slip stitches in there. Okay, so then I just work 1 double crochet into each of those loops that I created when I work that row of surface slip stitches. And this is really cool once you, I love this border. It hides all those little fringes, so you don't have to weave in any ends at all, because remember, you secured those. When you cut them, you secured them with that chain, so they're not going anywhere. You don't have to weave those in at all. You just have to encase them into this border that we're making. So now I would work, okay, so now I've worked 1 double crochet into each of those, right? Those little loops. And then I would do the same thing. I would turn the corner, make 3 double crochets here, and then working into the front loops only, right, of down here, I would work a double crochet into all the front loops only, 3 more at the corner, and then work into my other row of surface slip stitches that I made. Okay. And then 3 more double crochets, and then you just join with a slip stitch where you started. Join like you would join around. Okay. And now once you have all 4 sides of your double crochets worked, you would turn around and do the same exact thing on the opposite side. So I would start right here. Show you real quick. Just join a double crochet into the loop that we left unworked from the last side, right? And then I'd work all the way across each of those loops, because remember we were working in the front loop on the other side, so now we're working in the front loop again because we turned it over, but it's really the back loop of this. There's 2 loops in the stitch. We worked into one and now we're working into the other. Basically it's still the front loop with the way it's facing, but it was the back loop facing the other direction, if that's not too confusing. Okay, so I would work this double crochet all the way across here, across my slip stitches, and then once I got here, I would work it into both loops of these slip stitches, right? Because you have 2 loops here, so you can put your double crochet into both of those loops. And then what happens is you have a row of double crochets here and a row of double crochets here. And if this is too small, I usually make at least 2 rows of double crochet. You can even put a design in it, like switch colors for the next row, or make 1 row like with a solid color of single crochets, and then another, I should say rounds, and then another round of double crochets, so to make it longer. So you would want it to be like maybe a nice 2-inch border. And then once you got all those like a few rounds, right? Remember, you're going into this surface slip stitch here. You're going into the stitches that you already have existing from the bottom and from the first row and the last row worked. You're going into those loops, and then all you need is to make that 1 row of surface slip stitches, so you have something to go into there. And then down here, join it, and then make a few more rounds, so you have a nice long border here. And once you have that, you just close this border, right? So you just go, let's say I have it all the way around, make a couple more. Most important is this side, right? Because once you get to this side, let's say you have it nice and long here, these are just going to get stuck in there. So you're never going to see them. They're going to pretend these are right here. You're going to shove those in so you can't see them. And then you're just going to join. I have to turn here. You're just going to join however you want. You can join with slip stitches. You can join with single crochets. Right now I'm doing slip stitches. But I could do really anything. I could use single crochets. I could even use a needle and thread to close it if I wanted to. Here's single crochets. I usually do just slip stitch, right? You can slip stitch under both loops of both stitches or under just the inner loops. Either one is fine. It's just going to have a slightly different appearance. And then you basically close those 2 sides all the way around in a square. And then you have this sort of thick border that has a double-sided border. It's got a border on this side and a border on this side, and all of these little ends are going to be enclosed in that double-sided border. And then you don't have to worry about any fringe or anything like that. You have a nice, pretty border. You guys get it? I know that was kind of a quick, but really that's all there is to it. Thank you. Cool technique. Awesome border. Okay, cool. So you guys were so great. You guys were amazing. I feel like everybody understood me and got it and is good to go and ready to go on your next Mosaic Crochet adventure. So remember, everything is included in the pattern. You can rewatch this video as many times as you want. You are so very welcome. And this is a great beginner pattern. So get started with this. And once you learn the technique and learn how to do it, it's so much fun. It's a really fun crochet technique, and you can make some gorgeous things. So check on Pinterest and check Mosaic Crochet. People make amazing almost artwork like things. Okay. So you guys, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me, and I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye guys.